Hello everyone. Hi, this is Rahul Bavaria from Manifold. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. We have colleagues joining from across the world. I welcome you all to this global low voltage DC, what we call it as LVDC webinar series. And today topic is very pertinent to the needs across the continents. We will be focusing and talking around scaling solar water pumps in Asia and Africa. These two markets have really shown very high potential because of their population, consumption, and needs. And hence, we have brought experts from both these continents to share their learnings and experiences with the hope that some cross learnings will happen and both markets have something to learn from each other. With that, let me kind of briefly introduce the topic and then we will have our experts sharing their views. So let's quickly understand like how is the market and how do they differ. I have used India as a representative for Asia because it forms a prominent part, especially with focus on solar water pump. And I have the statistics more for sub-Saharan Africa, which again is the major portion for Africa. So between farmers population, India has 132 millions, while in sub-Saharan Africa it is 200 plus million. And within that, in sub-Saharan Africa, the small landholder farmers will be almost like around 40 millions. India has progressed and has some 52% irrigated land versus Africa where it's only 4%. So Africa really needs to grow up in terms of the adoption of irrigation first between its farmers, and thereafter it will be like into solar water. So from one way, the challenge is high, like you have to first make farmers realize the importance of irrigation, but then the technology leap directly to solar pumps, and that's why it offers a bigger market potential, but it has its challenges to really reach. In terms of Indian markets, we have some 30 million pumps, which is 22% of farmers you can say are using some form of pumps, which are primarily almost 70% of these pumps are run on the grid. These are mostly like free or very subsidized electricity, creating other different issues, including electricity and water nexus, and 9 millions of them are diesel. The numbers in terms of sub-Saharan Africa are still not very clear and evident. Maybe Martin would have some better numbers when he share his talk and presentation. In terms of how solar water pumps has evolved in these two markets, Africa remains still a very nascent market. Like it is seeing some 10,000 annual sales, and those numbers cumulative would be less than 0.05 million. India has progressed well, again pushed by the government subsidies. Almost 60 to 95% is government supported subsidies to the farmers in India, and that has given numbers of almost 50,000 annual sales, and it is ranking up fast. There are schemes which again my fellow panelist Nilanjan will discuss more, which will be targeting a total projected installation of almost 3 millions by 2022. So in the solar water pumps market, we can say that with current numbers, India is definitely offering a very high market. But if sub-Saharan Africa is really targeted and developed rightly, in I think next 10 to 15 years, it can go ahead in terms of the market size. As I said, like again, the contrast is quite high. Sub-Saharan Africa with quite high poverty levels, still there are no subsidies provided by the government, and the pay-to-go financing model is becoming prominent and much matured. While in Indian context, this is still a model that is evolving, and I would still say that it is in lead front. India has developed good local capabilities, capacities, and supply chains. While in Africa context, these are still very early, and most of it is import. Africa needs are more on the smaller size pump sizes. I think our African expert Martin will share more on this. India, I think, is gradually evolving, and the targeting is more done for a little higher pump sizes. Though even 3 and 10 HPs are also existing, but 5 and 7.5 HPs are more getting adopted. So this we want to just set up a very top level context so that when our experts share some of the challenges and potential solutions in this market for scale up, our participants will have a better context. Very briefly, what is SWP? Many of you would know coming from the OEM and some system integrator. Primarily three broad components, which also has a sizable share in bill of materials. One is solar panel, which is forming almost 25 to 30% of bill of material. Second is the pump, which is a little higher than solar pump. So its share can be ranging from 30 to 45%, depending on type of the pump size and other parts. And still is sizable, almost one third goes into all the controller and other auxiliaries of the pump design. So this is kind of a three big components, and we have to understand like where the innovation will come. Price barrier being one of the major things between these three components. So we will discuss this aspect as well in our presentation. The top three challenges. So there are multiple things when needs to be taken to the market. I am highlighting here top three challenges which has real potential to drive scalability in solar water pump. First, we have to drive the cost low and really make it, I would not say parity with another technology, but really it's a value proposition going high. Solar is almost commoditized in this space. So I think the next components will be motor and controller, and any kind of optimization, better energy efficiency through any right technology which can drive system cost of solar water pump low. I think that's where technology has a key role to play. And volumes, yes, with increase in volumes through kind of strategies that we will discuss in today's presentation, including right level of demand aggregation, how we can drive a better cost and drive more adoption. So that's on the cost part. The second part is on the services, very important aspect, especially when you are targeting the first time users to take these pumps who are newly getting introduced to irrigation. What kind of services will really drive their adoption and keeping a strong services repairability of this technology. Here, in addition to that, we also need to take a look into the financing. As I said, like pay-go model has really been adopted well in Africa. So what are learnings in Asia, in India around improved financing, improved programmatic financing? Nilanjan will talk a little more like how from better institutional financing in this case we need to drive better retail and end user financing models. So we look into these aspects, the operating model on the ground between third-party providers, between local cooperatives, between individual farmers, and trained supply chain and resources at those local rural/remote things. They all need to be really in sync to really deliver the value of this price product and important product to the customers. So that we will discuss under innovation in services. What we mean by value add services, again, there are new things that are being looked into. Looking at solar water pump not as only an irrigation device, but also portable drinking water device, also as your energy generator device and exporting energy to the grid. So these are all new value added services that are getting looked at to improve the overall viability and adoption between the farmers. And so first is cost, second we are talking of services, and third, which I think like kind of get a little underrated with all the drive of driving adoption, is actually right communication, messaging, and promotion strategy. I am glad organizations like GIZ are actually really focusing on this. And again, Nilanjan will take a deeper dive into it. But that is the crux. How do we make a end user like a farmer to really kind of feel that this is the right product for him which can solve the problem? So that communication messaging is an important step. And how do we select the right farmers? I think that also remains a very important problem to ensure that government subsidies are targeted well, and a commercial lending gets developed, taking cue from first rider of the subsidies. So I am hoping that our experts will talk about these three challenges which really needs to be solved to drive the scale up. So what we will discuss in today's webinar, I'm calling it as three P's. One, policy. What changes in the policy needs to happen to really drive the scale up? So this will be supported by our first speaker, Lanjan. Second is product. Here we bring an OEM perspective. So Martin Fisher, a OEM, Kickstart, and also a social enterprise from Africa. Martin will talk about what is a right product market fit. How do you develop a right product, strong product, reliable product, and then integrate services around it to drive adoption. So that's the second P. And third, where our third speaker, Rajneesh Rana from ESL, will share the organization experience around demand aggregation and very strong program management. Like, see, the end idea is like who will bell the cat between the new landscape evolving, who will take the risk. So it's a strong demand aggregator. In this case, Rajneesh will share ESL experience, who kind of bring and play as an interim player between supply and demand, take the risk, take the operational and effective program management capabilities, and help the end user get the value out of the product. So that's the first part, and that includes demand aggregation as well as financing. So this three P's is what we hope to kind of discuss in more depth with our experts. As I have already introduced our three speakers, Nilanjan from GIZ, very strong development expert, working with GIZ and working on a and managing a program on promotions of solar water pumps directly with MNRE. He is a master's degree graduate from London School of Economics and Political Science. And he is the person who will talk about the policy piece around SWP with specific focus on India. On the product part, we have Martin, co-founder and CEO Kickstart International. He is a PhD from Stanford University. Have been actually his experience and working in low-cost technology development with specific focus in Africa all started in 1991. So almost 30 years he has been toiling and working hard in Africa. Developed in 2000 Kickstart, which has now almost finished 20 years of working. Started and developed human-powered pumps, and now he is experimenting with solar water pumps. He has few hundreds already deployed. Again, experimenting with lot of things, innovations in products, innovations in services, and his another next pipeline product is a submersible BLDC pump, which is soon coming out with the market. So Martin will share his Africa on-ground experience and what it will take to really crack a right product in this very, very big potential market. And third speaker panelist is Rajneesh Rana. Rajneesh heads Agricultural Pump and Solar Department at ESL. He has more than 20 years of experience with an MBA degree and postgraduate law in international humanitarian. So Rajneesh will share his demand aggregation, demand side management, and how to really pull an effective program management between supply and demand side. So these are our line of speakers for today. I again welcome you all and now request Nilanjan, who is also a co-moderator with me in addition to a panelist. So Nilanjan, please share your thoughts on landscape, India landscape, and how do you think where policy has to play a role to drive scale up? Nilanjan.
Nilanjan, you have to unmute yourself.
Sorry. I hope my screen is visible to you all.
Yeah, it's visible.
Yes. So thanks a lot for P Manifold for inviting GIZ and me to participate in this session. I would switch off my camera for the presentation part, and then I will come back once my presentation is done, if that is fine with Rahul.
Sure, Nilanjan.
Okay, so let us start. I mean, I have 15 minutes to present. The area which I would be presenting is scaling up solar water pumps in India. I have divided my presentation into three broad parts. The first segment looks at the state of market and the policy landscape. The second part looks at the diverse business models that are emerging in India. And the last bit is scaling up and the next steps. So these are the broad three segments through which I have divided my presentation. Brief line about GIZ. I mean, GIZ is a company owned by the German government, and it supports the German government in the field of international cooperation for sustainable development. The program that I'm part of is called Promotion of Solar Water Pump. It's a bilateral measure between Ministry of New and Renewable Energy and Ministry of Economic Development and Cooperation, which is BMZ. GIZ is the implementing partner for the Indo-German Energy Program. So solar water pumps, I think what we see is that there has been an exponential growth in solar water pumps. We have roughly around 246,000 pumps installed as per the MNRE annual report of March 2020. If we take the private market, at least 10% of it, then we have already covered 2.5 lakh pumps. So it's much more than 2.5 lakh pumps which are already installed in India. So what is driving this? So there are a couple of things which are driving that. Obviously, there's a strong policy push, and which I will explain in a minute. But yeah, the PM Kusum scheme has been there. There are certain states which has been the key driver for going ahead with this push. Chhattisgarh, Rajasthan, Andhra Pradesh are some of the leading states for solar water pump installation. As Rahul mentioned, what are the potentials? Obviously, there are around 132 million farmers in India. What is also interesting is that 48% of the net sown area remains unirrigated. And plus, depending on what statistics you look at, there are roughly 29 to 30 million irrigation pumps, out of which 8 to 9 million are diesel and 20 to 21 million are electric pumps. So regarding the source for irrigation, there is also a huge untapped demand. Now, what are the key drivers? How is it that there's so much of installation happening now? Obviously, the first part is the falling of the solar panel prices. And as Rahul mentioned, that takes a substantial part of the cost of the solar pump as a component. So this has been one of the advantages. The second is obviously a strong push by the government to install solar water pumps. And the third is the growing demand for irrigation. So these have been, roughly the broad three key drivers which is driving, based on my understanding, the solar water pump installation in India. So Government of India came out with this scheme called PM Kusum, Pradhan Mantri Kisan Urja Suraksha Evam Utthan Mahabhijnan. This scheme came into existence in March 2019, and this scheme, I know all of you have you know about this scheme, but just to give you a backdrop, because I will be referring back to this scheme, has three broad components. The first part, component A, looks at grid connected, ground mounted or still mounted solar. So it's generally called the solar feeder model. And there are certain states which have gone ahead and have a couple of installations in the component A. The component B is more of the standalone part, and the target for this is 17.5 lakh, 50 lakh, 17.50 lakh standalone pumps, agricultural pumps. There's a cap, and 7.5 HP is the total cap for which subsidy is available from the government. The component C is solarization of 10 lakh grid connected agricultural pumps. So there are already electric pumps which are available, and now this effort is how to solarize that. If we look at the financing part for the component B and C, it is the subsidy from the central government is 30% of the benchmark cost or the tender cost, whichever is lower. And the remaining 30% comes from the state government. So total 60% of the cost comes from center and state combined, and the remaining 40% is owned by the farmer. Now 10% should be the down payment by the farmer, and the remaining 30% can be taken as a loan by the farmer. For component A, discoms are eligible for the procurement based incentive, which is at 0.40 paisa per unit, or 6.6 lakhs per megawatt, whichever is lower, for a period of 5 years. Now, let me take you to this particular slide, and this is important because, you know, just like any country, India is not, it's completely heterogeneous, and this particular map, in the left hand side, each dot highlights 100 solar water pumps. The middle map shows the groundwater situation, and the right hand map shows the solar irradiation. Now, for making a very generalized statement, the western and the peninsular India has access to subsidized farm power, and that is also a region which has a very high amount of groundwater depletion, while the eastern and the central region is water abundant and yet energy poor. These are very generic statements that I'm making, but just to give you a broad backdrop of how the India looks like. Now, why is this important? Now, if you see in the PM Kusum scheme, there has been three broad components which has been highlighted. Now, for each of the state, they are free to choose which component they want to use, utilize, and get engaged. Now, we need to see this as a template for moving ahead, for going forward. And that is a policy decision which the state needs to make based on these parameters of water, energy, and food. So what works in the peninsular and western India would not necessarily work in the central and eastern India. This is very important because until and unless we understand this finer aspect, it's very challenging if we go ahead with a policy which has negative impacts on the natural resources. So the market status, how do we see the market status? So first of all, it is a subsidy driven market. Plus, it is also a push market. Push market in the sense that solar water pump is not an aspirational product. It needs to be pushed, and therefore we need the subsidy part. So right now the market, the way I look at it is it's a B2G market, business to government. It's a regulated market in the sense that the pumps which are accredited, they are only eligible for subsidy. The market segmentation is absent, and when I say market segmentation, there is no clear demarcation of what product would suit what kind of market. I will explain this later as we move on. Pricing depends on the benchmark or tender cost. There is limited involvement of financial institutions, especially for end user financing. Now, when large entities like EESL comes in, there is obviously an excitement, and financial institutions are coming ahead. And that's what we will also hear from Mr. Rana, how EESL is doing. But in the off-grid part, especially in the component B, there is very limited involvement of financial institutions. The last but not the least is the demand aggregation. Demand aggregation still remains a challenge. It's both for component B and C, but more for component B. The simple reason is that a DISCOM may have rural customers as their captive audience, but they may not, when they are a farmer, I mean, the market segmentation is not that clear. And I will come to that also in my subsequent slides. Now, in terms of business model, what we see is that there are diverse kind of models which are coming up. Asset sharing model, where the physical asset is shared by a group of farmers, farmer cooperative or a joint liability group. GIZ has field experience and worked with both farmers cooperative and joint liability group. Joint liability group could get bank finance for installation. Enterprise based model for water as a service. So there the asset lies with either the entrepreneur or the rural or the local NGO or the farmer cooperative, and water is distributed. So that is more of a pay as you go model. There are different organizations who have been piloting these kind of models. International Water Management Institute along with Aga Khan Foundation has tried this model in Samastipur in Bihar. There are other organizations also who are trying this model. Micro pumps. When I say micro pumps, I'm saying pumps which are below 1 HP or below. Now that is a perfect fit for marginal farmers, and the ticket size for a micro pump also fits very well with the MFIs, the microfinance institutions. Some of the microfinance institutions that we know of are trying to look at this piece of market. The last is a very interesting part, and my next slide highlights that there are portable solar pump model which are also being tried out, where the pump can move from one location to the other based on the requirement. Now, these are, so the business models that I have highlighted in the off-grid part, if we can generalize, we can see that these are mainly private sector driven or civil society driven. So these are done in bits and pieces in different parts of the country. Innovations are also happening in the component C, which is the grid connected solar pumps. And we have states like Andhra Pradesh, which is looking at a DC brushless motor pumps, where the pumps can only be used for irrigation, but the additional energy generated can only get back to the grid. We have Sky model of Gujarat, which is again looking at a slightly different model from Andhra Pradesh. It's still in the early stages, but different states are looking at different kinds of model for component C. For component A, what we have seen is that the state of Maharashtra has been a forerunner, and they have a scheme called Solar Agricultural Feeder Policy. And they are also trying different kinds of installations as part of the component A. So the basic difference in the business models of component A and component B and C are that in component B, it's primarily private sector and civil society based organizations which are driving the different models. In component C, it is primarily the government institutions or the government bodies which are driving the innovations. And this is my last slide. So what are the key things that I think is required for scaling up? First, what I see is that there is a need for improved mechanism for awareness, because we are dealing with a push market. And then it's not just awareness for the farmers, which is the demand side, but also a need to work with the supply side part, the financial institutions. They are not keen in coming up and providing loan to the farmers because the lack of understanding of the technology, the lack of understanding of the business model, and most importantly, they are not sure if this goes into a non-performing asset. What do they do with that asset? Can we create a secondary market for that asset? The second important part is the convergence with the existing state government schemes and programs. Now, there are state government programs which are looking at solar water pump. There are schemes in both, just as an example, Assam government, Orissa government have agricultural departments, minor irrigation departments, which are looking at solar water pump. But the subsidy is much higher than what is being provided through PM Kusum. Now, if we do not converge these two schemes, what happens is that you are competing with a captive audience. Obviously, the audience in a push market would go to places where there is maximum subsidy. So if the state government provides 80% subsidy, there's no guess that there would be no people interested for the PM Kusum part, where the total subsidy, including the state government, is at the max 60%. So there's a huge potential for convergence of these state level programs. This brings me to the next part, which is the improved targeting of the end user. If we have multiple schemes, we need to be extremely clear which scheme targets what kind of farmer. Are we looking at marginal farmers with one scheme? Are we looking at the mid segment of the farmers through the other scheme? This has to be clearly chalked out at the policy level. The communication needs to go, the entire machinery needs to cater to these market segmentation. Commercial lending is also a point which I mentioned. Just one example, Kisan credit card is a card which is available with the banks. It is a known financial product. Can we tweak the scope of KCC to incorporate solar water pumps? If we can, what it does is obviously immediately it brings in a captive audience, because the financial product is known with the banks. The banks are also comfortable with the farmers who have already been a KCC holder, Kisan credit card holder, because they have a history of their credit history with them. They have already financed them. So immediately there is a targeting happening, there is a segmentation of market happening, and this allows much more confidence of the financial institutions to move ahead. My last point is, how can we create more value for the product, for the asset? Now, for the component C, what we see is that there is a potential to sell the electricity back to the grid, and therefore there is a scope for earning money for the farmers, and that's an incentive for the farmer. But in component B, what happens when the pump is being not used for irrigation? Because you don't need 365 days of irrigation. What happens to the days when you do not need? Can the asset be used? Can there be alternative use of the asset? If we can create more value for the end user, it becomes more attractive. So we can move beyond a push market to a pull market. And the moment a particular asset has additional values, it also becomes much more interesting for the financial institutions. So I will stop at that and hand it over to Rahul.
Thank you very much, Nilanjan. I think this was a very good summary of India landscape. And especially I think it creates kind of a good way for Martin to share his experience now from Africa market, which is on contrasting side, has no subsidies and pretty driven by developmental sector, non-profits and private parties. So Martin, over to you.
Yeah, hi, thank you, Rahul, and thank you for that. It's a very, very different situation, of course, in sub-Saharan Africa. I'm going to take you back and talk quite quickly through some of the history, tell you a little bit about the continent, and then about what's happened with human-powered pumps and how we get into solar-powered pumps, just very quickly here. So, sorry, what's happening? Yeah, so Kickstart is a nonprofit social enterprise. Our simple mission is to lift millions of people in sub-Saharan Africa out of poverty, quickly, cost-effectively, and sustainably, and do that by having them make a lot more money. And of course, sub-Saharan Africa really is one of the world's very, very poorest places. We've got a very big population similar to India, so it's a much bigger continent, of course. But you know, half the people below the poverty line, 30% chronically hungry, 35% under the fives are stunted, and a very, very young population with 42% under the age of 16. So the population is growing very, very rapidly, set to grow to 2.2 billion by 2050 and 4 billion by 2100. And climate change is having very, very big impacts on the continent. 80% of the poor are smallholder farmers scraping out an existence on these very, very small plots of land with very primitive tools. And the best way for millions of them to make a lot more money is precisely to move from rain-fed farming to irrigated agriculture. And the reasons for this, of course, is when you do rain-fed farming, you have low-value crops. You only get 1 or 2 harvests per year. You all plant at the same time. You all harvest at the same time. You flood the markets. The price goes down. And in fact, something like 45% of the crop gets spoiled before it gets eaten or taken to the market. And when the rains don't come, you have no crop at all. With irrigation, you have high-value crops, multiple harvests, year-round high prices because you're selling in the off-seasons, selling right at the farm gate. And of course, if the rains don't come, you can still plant. So literally, it moves from sort of failing subsistence farming to profitable family farms if you move to irrigation. And of course, globally, something like 20% of farmland is irrigated and produces 40% of our food and 60% of the value. And as we've just heard, India is already at 48% irrigated. Of course, interesting history about how it got there. Across Asia, it's 40%. And something like half that is done by individual smallholder farmers. If you look at Africa as a whole, 6% of farmland is irrigated. Most of that's actually, a large portion of that is in North Africa, especially in Egypt and Morocco. If we just look at sub-Saharan Africa, it's only 4%. And most of that in 3 countries, South Africa, Sudan, and Madagascar, and about 40% of it on large-scale farms. And most countries actually have less than 2% of farmland irrigated. Many, many countries, it's less than 1% irrigated. So there's these annual hungry seasons, massive food insecurity, and that's also, of course, a huge opportunity because that's when you can make money. There's plenty of water sources, a lot of rivers and streams and lakes, shallow hand-dug wells. Tube wells are still very, very rare. There's very expensive to drill a tube well. So most of these are hand-dug wells, most of them, you know, less than 14 meters deep, but people do go a lot deeper, of course, occasionally. And then people are digging and building rainwater catchment ponds and dams. There's a huge amount of renewable groundwater, unlike in India, where it's getting to be very short. And we're using less than 10% of it, less than 5% of the surface water. And our guesstimate is that something like 20 to 25% of farms in sub-Saharan Africa have access to shallow or surface water on their farm. Now, that's not because 20 to 25% of the land has access to water, but it's because throughout history, people have always lived in those areas where there is shallow groundwater. So that's where the concentrations of people are, because that's quite a high number. But there's almost zero history of irrigation, almost no electricity, very little in the rural areas, something like 33%, but it's very little on the farm. And really no fuel in the rural areas either, very hard to get to. And there were no affordable technologies. And so starting back in 2000, we developed human-powered irrigation pumps. We brand named them Moneymaker pumps. Our best-selling pump is a little Stairmaster machine. And you can see pulls water from shallow wells. It's a suction pump. You walk back and forth. You pressurize it through a hose pipe. I'm retailing about $160. We have something called the Moneymaker hip pump. Looks like a hand pump, operates with a sort of rocking motion, so much easier to use than a hand pump. This also can irrigate about 1¼ acres. That's a few hours in the morning, a few hours in the evening. It's about $100 with the hose pipes retail. And we're just launching a brand new pump at $50 retail price. Now, one interesting thing is here, our prices are getting cheaper and cheaper because that's actually where the market is going, if you really want to get to the masses. This is $50. We're just about to launch this, including hose pipes. That's a retail price. This particular farmer here on the right, he bought one of these early pumps. He hired 6 people full-time for the full day, irrigated 2 acres of land with that little pump, and now bought a solar pump. So that's why we call it the starter pump. It's a step up. We're actually launching this for the COVID hunger pandemic, get as many of these little things out there as possible. Very strict design criteria because these things are used in very remote places, strong and durable, easy to maintain and repair without any tools, install and use without any training, lightweight, portable. People transport them from their home to the field. They don't leave them in the field. They store them in a small house. And all these hold for solar too, as we'll find out. Manual operation, of course, in our case, have to be very efficient, and high density packing for shipping. These are all the things you want if you're trying to design something for smallholder farmers in mass. And of course, cultural issues about how you use it, and we have to modify the design there. We used to manufacture in Africa. We now actually manufacture in China. It's more efficient and cheaper to ship from China to different countries in Africa than it is to ship internally to a high quality mass production. We then established a for-profit supply chain across sub-Saharan Africa, where we sell to distributors and they on-sell to retailers. This is a for-profit supply chain selling these pumps, and you can see them being promoted there in different places. But of course, having a great product and a good distribution network is not enough. In fact, we're dealing with really the most challenging marketing and sales job in the world. We're not selling to government, we're selling to individual farmers, which is the same with solar pumps. If you look at Coca-Cola, they took about 10 years and spent hundreds of millions of dollars in marketing before they started making any profits in Africa. And of course, you know, they were selling a sticky, addictive drink. We're selling a complete change in someone's life. To the very, very poorest farmers, sort of 10 kilometers off the Tarmac road, a brand new big ticket item they've never seen before, and changing generations of farm practice. Instead of waiting for the rain and planting and then harvesting, they now have to get up every morning and get out and irrigate every single day. And limited word of mouth. It turns out when you make a lot of money, you don't go around and tell your neighbors, hey, I just made a lot of money. So word of mouth doesn't work nearly as well as one might think. So it actually, you have major market failures and government failures, and we use our donor funds as smart subsidies to fund the education and promotional campaigns. Not to subsidize the cost of the pumps, but the marketing and educational campaigns, because you're doing behavior change. Therefore, we have to measure impacts. On average, a farmer using one of these pumps, East Africa increases their net profit per year by $700 in new profits per year, and they get year-round income. They invest that in food and education, other new investments. Net farm income as a result goes up by about 4 times, and really taking a major step out of poverty when somebody goes to irrigate from non-irrigating. And this is a huge difference because there's so little irrigation, you can make so much more money when you do it because there's such a food shortage in the dry season. To reach the farmers most cost effectively, we work with and we partner with about 350 partners. These are all the biggest NGOs, small NGOs, CBOs, UN agencies, government agencies. They already work with farmers. It's very high leverage in order to reach the farmers and educate the farmers through them. And so we teach them about irrigation, and they go on and join them to teach the farmers. We started in Kenya in 2000 with these little pumps, and we're now in the 17 highest potential countries in the continent. And to date, our impacts on these pumps, we've sold 350,000 of these small pumps. It's about 260,000 farming businesses. Not every pump results in a positive business, making about $180 million a year in profits. 1.3 million people have taken a major step out of poverty just from those families, and growing enough fruit and vegetable to feed about 13 million people. And we're selling about 20,000 pumps a year just now. Great, so how do you move from human-powered pumps to solar-powered pumps? And again, the price is critical because you're selling to these very, very poor people. Now, a human puts out about 80 watts of continuous power. That's if you're not even working very hard, just kind of walking. And manual pumps are pretty efficient. They're about 80%. They're positive displacement pumps, actually very, very efficient. Solar pumps, on the other hand, are not very efficient, only about 40% efficient, going from the sun power down to the, from the panel power down to the water that you pump. So to replace that 80 watts, we need about 160 watts. So we need low-cost solar power, obviously, because if it's $6 a watt, like it used to be not many years ago, that would never work to have solar pumps. Now, if we want to have a human-powered pump, which is retailing at $200, which is our most expensive pump in rural Africa, including the hose pipes and spares, it's got to cost about $100 in COGS wherever you have it made, in our case in China. And so a solar pump, if you wanted to sell at $200, also be $100 in COGS. Now, if the actual pump and the controller, and I know you said a lot more money than this, but if we can get that down to about $20 and the cable, the mountings, and the hose pipe down to about $15, that leaves something like $65 for the panels. And you can see to get that kind of panel, you've got to be at 40 cents a watt in order to replace a human. But that's about where we are today. So the first time now that prices are that low, we can actually talk about very, very low-cost solar pumps. And that's changed dramatically over the years, of course. So who is this typical farmer? Well, they're pulling from a shallow water source on their farm. And like we said, 20 to 25% of farmers in sub-Saharan Africa have that water source. If they don't, they can make a rainwater catchment, or they can rent land next to the water. That young man I showed you before actually was renting that plot of land. It's about 20 million potential farmers who have access to shallow water. What do? They dig that hand dug well, like I said, less than 12 meters, usually much, much shallower than that, or they pull from surface water. But that water is dirty. These are not protected wells. These are not tube wells. So it has to pump dirty water. They keep the pump in the house. You can't leave a pump like this or any pump out in the field, especially not solar panels. They'll get stolen. It has to be portable, carry back to the house every day, very often up and down a steep hill. They're going to irrigate high-value crops that they're going to sell in the local market, and they can actually make very good money. They can easily pay for a pump in one season, in 4 months. They also use it to save their rain-fed crops, to water livestock and poultry, and for domestic water once they get one of these pumps. So we set ourselves that challenge, how to make the most efficient and lowest cost solar pump. What would be the design criteria? Well, a submersible pump could go down into a tube well of 2 inches as and when we start drilling those in Africa, which is just starting to happen, but on a very small basis, but it will be happening much more. Also a muddy pond or shallow well, hand dug well. You want maximum efficiency at something like 8 meters, so it can still go and pump as deep as 12 meters because you have a broad efficiency curve. 100-watt panel, the most you can really carry on your back would be a 120-watt panel. It's portable. You can see the picture on the left there, somebody carrying that on their back in a bag. You want to be able to irrigate at least half an acre in 4 hours, so that's about 0.42 liters per second. And for that, it's only about 35% efficiency, but you want that price to be down, like I said, retail, about $200, which means about $100 in COGS. And obviously, you'd like to have some extra features, a cell phone charger, maybe a battery charger, and a pay-as-you-go option. So we said, okay, if we want to design this, who's the best collaborator to design a radically new pump? And we actually worked with a company called NCAP Technologies. They are the biggest supplier of brushless DC motorized pumps to the US auto industry. They make literally millions of these things every year. They're experts on low-cost encapsulated pumps. We had the head of R&D from ITT, University of Kentucky, UC Berkeley. We had a whole team working on this with us to design this pump. And we did high-tech engineering and design and manufacturing. You can see it's a very small diameter pump, 2 inches. This is the brushless DC motor with the rotor. a lot of parts, and then a single encapsulation and a single injection molding now, which is the trick here, why it's so low cost. There's only one screw, which is just screwing in the filter down the bottom here, and that holds everything in place. So no loose parts, nothing to lose, single encapsulation. So it's nice. We didn't actually get to our design criteria. We need a 120 watt panel, not the 100 watt panel that we were looking for. But the real problem with this very high-tech design is the tooling cost. It turns out it's very challenging to design such a small pump, expensive tooling, and for high quality, high volume production, you need the expensive tooling. But you, of course, if you're building the demand for a low-cost, low-margin product from the poor, you're not going to have a lot of sales, and you don't have any early adopters who are willing to pay a lot. You're not going to have many sales to support the production or the expensive on that tooling. So it's very, very hard to recover that tooling cost. And so with low volume production, instead of this high mass produced by robots, you still have a retail price for this of about $400, which didn't hit our target of about $200. And the quality was hard to guarantee without that tooling as well. The other option, of course, if you see what you can buy off the shelf, so you can buy the the lowest cost brushless DC motor you can find, mass produced somewhere in China, and it's already in production. It's got most of the quality issues all sorted out. You can make that, modify that to make it for a solar irrigation pump. It's not optimized for smallholders, and even then came to a retail price of about $360. Again, we're not close to that $200 target of the holy grail we're trying to get to. So then you say, okay, well, can we finance it? So you want to do a pay-as-you-go financing. The way this works, if you have the solar pump with an embedded pay-as-you-go chip, you have your cell phone, and you have the financer or the company that is doing the financing. It has the back end, the cloud back end, and you have the farmer who has his chip and his app on his even a feature phone. The farmer makes a payment to the financer. He gets a code. He plugs that code into the pump. That turns on the pump for however long he paid for, or she paid for, and the pump operates for that long. And this way, you can turn off the pump. The pump doesn't operate if you don't pay. We did a bunch of experiments with pay-as-you-go, about 100 pump market test for a $370 pump, retailing at $450 over 12 months. And we tried a couple of different things. If you pay per time used, you only pay when you're actually using the pump. So you don't pay if you don't use it. Now, the problem is that means you don't pay in the rainy season because you're not using it. Now, it also turns out people don't like to pay very often because they don't use the pump enough because they're so aware of it. But we also tried pay per time passed. So this is you pay every week or every month whether you use it or not. And both of them have challenges with pay-as-you-go. People tend to under-irrigate and tend to default with pay per use. And per time passed, of course, in the rainy season, they simply don't pay because why would they pay? Because they're not using the pump, and then it's very hard for them to catch up. So again, you get defaults there. And what happens in both cases is you end up not knowing how long it's going to take to finance, which makes it very challenging. We also tried a hybrid where you pay a little bit per time passed and then extra when you use it. But in all cases, you couldn't predict exactly when the payment is going to come in. And so it's actually pay-as-you-go is not nearly as easy as people think it should be with something like an irrigation pump. It's much easier with lighting because lighting you pay for every day. But nonetheless, we did sell a few hundred of these pumps, and the farmers are very happy. You can see this farmer here making a lot of extra money and carrying her pump up the hill. So solar pumps are ideal for rural sub-Saharan Africa. Like I said, grid electricity is rare, only 33%, and petrol and diesel are expensive and hard to get. And so solar pumps are being developed and sold. And this friendly competition is driving innovations about these pumps. And medium and large scale systems above 1 horsepower, the vast majority, of course. Nobody really knows these numbers, but people are guessing that about 25,000 pumps are sold in the whole of Africa. That's not just sub-Saharan Africa, that's the whole of Africa. $125 million is what people are guessing. That was in 2019. It's about $5,000 a pump. Of course, these big systems of over 3 horsepower and many over 10 horsepower are the most expensive ones. You can see how the numbers add up very quickly. 50% of the pumps are in North Africa or South Africa, leaving about 10 to 12,000 pumps in sub-Saharan Africa. And probably when you're talking about these small BLDC pumps that we're talking about, maybe 5 to 10,000 pumps a year. And that was pre-COVID. They were growing at about 20% per year. Right now, they're not really selling at all, but that's a different story. So who are these customers? Like I said, it's about 20 million farmers. The easiest customers, of course, are those that you convert from motorized irrigation, and they're going to save money. They're already irrigating. Now they're going to save money by going to solar, or convert from a human-powered pump. We don't know the real numbers, but motorized pump irrigators are probably 1 to 2 million across the subcontinent. Human-powered irrigators, we had about 350,000 pumps that we've sold, and there's some others too, but not many. Or it's bucket irrigators. Bucket irrigators, maybe 2 to 3 million across the subcontinent. Of course, they can increase their area, make a lot more money if they can move to a solar pump, 8, 10 times their area. Or the new irrigators, who are the hardest to educate. That's where the real market is, with about 15 million of them who could irrigate from shallow wells or surface water on their farm. One of the innovators here is Future Pump. They actually have a factory in India where they also license to sell. They're just starting to sell there. But they do all their field testing in Kenya, and they sell across sub-Saharan Africa. Their pump is actually a surface pump. It's piston powered with a flywheel, 7 meter suction, and a pressure head of about 9 to 10 meters. It's portable, like this. They have 2 pumps. Their cheapest one is retailing at about $395. Their most expensive one at about $625. And you can see the different size in the panel. That's with the panel and with the hose pipe too. And they sell into 13 countries in sub-Saharan Africa, as well as into a bit of Asia, Nepal and PNG. So they have a model there where they distribute through them. Another major player is Sun Culture. They sell complete solar irrigation systems, including drip and deep lift submersible solar pumps. And they IoT connect their systems. They sell primarily, their headquarters in Kenya, and now they've also expanded into Uganda, Ethiopia, Zambia, Togo, Cote d'Ivoire, and Senegal. And they have their 2 primary products here. You can see what they've done here is they've added a battery and lights and even a TV to their system. And you can see the pricing here for the small systems, about 9, 10 cash, or you can pay off in 30 months with the pay-as-you-go. Or if you got the TV as well, pay off also in 30 months at $1,400. And this is sold, with the hose pipes, the cable, the sprinkler, the 160 watt or 300 watt panel. Like I said, a battery, the LED lights, and an optional TV. Now, one of the reasons they add these lights and the TV is to reduce those issues of default on the pay-as-you-go, because you're going to want to use your TV or your lights every single day. So even in the rainy season, you're going to continue to pay. So this is a trick that they've used quite effectively, and they have a sort of full service program that they provide with this pump, a lot of after sale service and the like. Many other players, Simusolar is doing pay-as-you-go in Tanzania and Uganda. Sunny Irrigation is actually continuing to sell our pump across Kenya with pay-as-you-go. Ignite Solar now is selling some of the Future pumps and the Sun Culture pumps, I believe, also sort of door-to-door pay-as-you-go. Now, Solar now is selling a bunch of other products pay-as-you-go, so it's actually a different model, because they actually even put that pay-as-you-go onto your solar lighting system as well. So pay-as-you-go for lighting has taken off in a huge way. It's still very, very tricky for solar pumps. Like I said, our holy grail to actually scale solar pumps in sub-Saharan Africa is still, in our mind, that $200 pump, half an acre at about 10 meters in 4 hours, portable, dirty water, plug and play, maintain and install without any tools, durable, obviously a dry run cutout, and cell phone charging. That means you need to make it very, very efficient, something around 50% efficiency and a broad efficiency curve on the motor and impeller designs. Something like that low cost encapsulation is the only way you're really going to get down to the very, very low cost we're talking about. If it's low enough cost, of course, even the pump itself could be the spare part. If it blows out, you just replace the pump, $20, $30, as opposed to replacing anything else. And of course, low cost after sales service, we need a bunch of innovation still there. There's some ideas around using smartphones and other things. but definitely needs some more innovation on that. The other things which are really going to force solar to take off is it simply cannot be done by the private sector alone. There's just too much promotion required to convince millions of people to irrigate, and especially when it's expensive. So we need smart time-bound government and donor subsidies to get that behavior change. And the government can do a lot more. They can promote smallholder irrigation for one. You actively talk about it, train their agri extension staff, include irrigation in their educational curriculum, financially support partners and to sponsor field days and the like, give away samples to women and youth groups, lead farmers to kickstart the demand. But even more than that, on the financial side, absolutely cut import duties. And it's pumps, pipes. It's also well drilling jigs, because well drilling is still not available in most of the continent, and it's still very expensive as a result. So these are hand dug wells. But the smart time-bound subsidies for sustainable systems is absolutely needed, and we're starting to see that happen. So in Rwanda, we've got a 50% subsidy on farm equipment, including solar water pumps. Uganda is about to launch a 75% subsidy, including solar water pumps in 2021. Morocco has a big EU and UNDP funded program installing solar water pumps. Ethiopia's going to cover 66,000 families with solar water pumps, funding by the Green Climate Fund in the coming couple of years, 2 or 3 years. Innovative financing, absolutely. PAYG, customized loan packages, payment holidays and the like. We need a lot more work on that. A loan guarantee fund for irrigation loans would be very useful, because the microfinance organizations, the banks, are really risk averse, and it's very risky to lend to these poor farmers. In Kenya, the IFC is doing precisely that on a pilot program here with a bank guarantee to banks for giving solar water pump loans. Now they're looking at sort of slightly higher end pumps here, installed with a 5-year guarantee. So that is my talk. Thanks a lot. Sorry, I went a little bit over time. And please join us to Irrigate Africa. Thank you.
Hi, Martin. I think absolutely fantastic presentation. And I think it really gives a depth overview of what things really needs to change. I was really amazed with the price point difference. Like in India, I think the difference what I saw, Martin, which was very cool, like in none of your slide you said that government should give subsidy. In India, I see most of the players always starting from that point, and even after subsidizing to farmer, a farmer still needs to pay minimum, I would assume, like a kind of $1,000 or $1,200 for a 3 horsepower pump. And you are talking of a 200 watts, $200 price point pump. Very interesting. I think like all, including Kickstart and other players, you should also explore India market. And with that, I think let's have Rajneesh Rana from ESL, who with ESL is hosting a very interesting program of ISA for demand aggregation, primarily across Africa. And I think let's hear like how Rajneesh and team have really solved a very challenging problem of aggregating demand from 22 countries, and what really goes behind financing and creating such structures for driving viability. Rajneesh.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Rahul. As I'm audible?
Yes, Rajneesh, you are audible. Continue.
Yeah, thanks, Rahul. So I hope all the audience and attendees are quite well during this. They are safe and healthy during this challenging time, and we have to take care about ourselves. Moving ahead with my presentation, as requested by the P Manifold, I will be touching upon how the demand aggregation has helped in mobilizing the solar water pumping in African countries, and also we have done some work in the India also. So I will be touching that one in my presentation primarily, giving a little bit background about the ESL. So it's a very young organization with in a public sector enterprise of Government of India, a decade-old organization, and in last 10 years, we have been recognized at a different platform. We have been awarded as a Forbes Leadership Award in the Best Public Sector Undertaking in 2018. We have been awarded as the best procurement agency in Asia by the World Bank, and also the best procurement agency in the India. We are aggregating the demand, we are procuring the goods, we are implementing them, and passing the benefit to the ULBs or the customers of all this aggregation of demand and the good financing we are getting from our multilateral bilateral partners. So all in all, this is about the organization, what we do, and I just touch upon the little bit on the programs also. What the programs we have done, they are quite interesting because they have done first time in the world most of these programs, and the good thing about these programs are that they are based on the pay as you save model in most of the programs. We have distributed almost around 360 million of LED bulb program, the world largest LED bulb program, and this is not only help providing the LED bulb to the consumers at a very lower rate, economical rate, but it has many benefit also. Just to give an example, earlier 5 years ago, most of the people are used to have an incandescent bulb or your CFLs. The 100-watt incandescent bulb can be replaced easily with the 10-watt or 9-watt LED bulb. So that means in a simple manner, we are saving a 90% energy, which is not only reducing the energy consumption bill of an individual customer or the consumer, but also it helps in saving a lot of CO2 emission and avoided peak demand, which in tune, if you will go with the 360 million, the statistics are in front of us, almost a 10,000 megawatt avoided peak demand we have reduced, and 38 million ton of CO2 per year is the basically we are seeing. Similarly, a very interesting program in the LED street light also, where we have replaced almost 11 million street lights in India in all the municipalities, where the municipality need not to pay anything upfront. We are investing, and from the energy which we are saving by replacing the conventional street light with the LED street light, we are recovering the money over the period of time. Smart meter, that's a need of the hour. I will not go into the detail. Agriculture pump set, this is also one of the world's largest program we have done. In Andhra Pradesh, so far, not of this scale of agriculture pump set program has been done here also. The farmer need not to invest anything. They got the energy efficient pump with the B 5-star rated here in India, which is the top notch energy efficient pump sets. We have provided them. And the recovery has been done through the DISCOM, because here the DISCOMs are supplying the electricity to the farmer at a very economical price or cheaper prices, or on a zero billing basis. So whatever the savings they are getting from the replacement of old pump with the new pump, we are recovering from the DISCOMs. Solar lamp, we have distributed around 6 million solar lamps to the school-going children. Many of the remote areas where they don't have the accessibility of the electricity, or the electricity generally don't available in the night time, school children can read themselves, they can do their homework and other work. That is, and again, what Mr. Niranjan Ghosh has touched upon, the decentralized power plant. We have initiated that program even before the government has launched that program in Maharashtra, where we are solarizing the agriculture feeders, where the farmers can get a daytime reliable power. At one place, we are putting up a small solar power plant, and from that solar power plant, the farmers are fed through that grid. So we will move into the next slide. As I have touched already, that how the demand aggregation helps. If you see this slide, in 2014, when we did our first procurement of the LED bulbs, that time, not very long ago, only 5 years ago, that time the LED bulbs was considered as a luxury, or it is an item which only the rich people can afford. The market rate was somewhere around $8 to $9 that time. So nobody wants to invest when they are getting incandescent bulb at almost 60 times of a lower cost what was of the LED bulb was there. So we have started with this program. the first procurement we did as compared to the market rate, the prices, because of the aggregation of demand, first time 1 million tender of the LED bulb was done, which was never happened in the world anywhere. It was eye opener for the industry or surprise for many of the other players. So we able to reduce the price by almost 40% in the first itself, but that was only a 1 million, though it was a big. By getting the encouragement of this thing and taking up with the state government and DISCOM, we done the tenders in a frequent manners, even up to the 50 million at a one time. And you see that in a 4 years time, from what we did the first procurement of in a $4.50 has come down to even $0.50. The cost has come down to even $0.50. And even in compared to market, it's almost 10 times, you can say, the reduction of the rates are there. So what happens that because of this, the consumption got increased, people start taking up, and they are start saving in the electricity bill. So this is the ideal, we can say, aggregation of demand model throughout world. We propagate that one, that how it is benefited to the government, to the consumer, to the organization, to the society. So we'll move on to the next slide now. So this is primarily will be talking about the ISA solar water pumping system. ISA, we know that it's an international solar alliance, which is responsible, or which is taking a lead to helping out the member countries that how we can do many programs in the solar area. And ISA has approached us because of seeing our aggregation of demand and the procurement, what we have done in the public domain over the years. So they have requested us that can we do some sort of a tendering or the price exploration for our member countries. So when we discuss with them, it seems a very difficult proposition, because sitting in one country doing a tendering for almost 22 countries and the supplier from all over the world. So it's a three-way dimension which we have to see. A lot of deliberation happened in this one, and the challenges we have faced also, I will discussing about that one also. So around 272,000 100,000 agriculture solar pumping system were tendered for 22 member countries, primarily for the African countries. Some of the other countries were also there, and Australian continent countries were also there. So these countries have given their requirement, tentative requirement, and the size of the pumps which they are interested to procure if they feel that the price which will be explored or which will come will suits them. So we started this exercise, and being a very complex exercise, the entire exercise was carried out in a 4 months time, which includes with the interaction of the many of the stakeholders at the ground level, the suppliers, the member countries, because agriculture pump or the solar agriculture pump is a very, very tough subject to do in a way of procurement basis also, because you will find a different province in a country itself where the water table will be different, the terrain will be different altogether, the cropping pattern is totally different, the consumer behavior totally different from one place to another place. Then you have many countries where there is no seaport, how the material is to be transported. Then many of the countries were interested that they will would like to explore the prices, that what will be the export prices from the country where the pumps will be dispatched, or the entire solar water pumping system will be dispatched. Some of the countries were interested that they want that at their port the material to be delivered. Then the third categories emerged, as some of them said that they are interested that the suppliers who will be delivering the material, they should install also the pump at the ground level. And the fourth category emerged, where some of the countries were interested that they would like to explore the prices, where the 5-year maintenance also has to be included in this price. So we will move to the next slide. I will explain about this one. So 22 member countries, how difficult the price matrix was for us, and it took a lot of time and a lot of deliberation. There are 22 member countries. Then 24 models of solar pump across, because the AC you have a different category, DC you have a different category, then you have a surface pump, then you have a submersible pump. So all in all, 96 price component exploration per country multiplied by 22 countries. So that was the kind of a, and further multiply by the 4 component, that is, as I explained, that the freight, X country, FOR to the country, installation, commissioning, and maintenance. Somehow that was concluded, as I said, with the in a 4 months time. The pre-bid meeting happened with the involvement of many of the embassies were there, and on our experts were there. So the good thing was that when the prices, though the bidders were not having the full information with them, the kind of information one should require for doing the solar pumping tender, as I said, that the province, which place will be, how much capacity, what HP, the rainfall, and all this thing. But the bidders have participated in that one, and we got almost 25 to 40% lower rate as compared to the prevailing market rate prices in these countries, which is a substantial reduction, I feel, in the first tender itself. And hopefully if we'll go for the subsequent tenders, and when the bidders will get more confidence, I think the prices will come down further. I'm talking about the African market. So that's the thing. So moving further, then if you will see about this one, before I will start this slide, then there is a different challenges with the countries also, which I will explain through this slide. Because the solar pump, water pumping is a expensive proposition, and as one of my co-panelists has already touched upon, that the government is providing subsidy in India also 60%, ranging to the 90%. So it's an expensive proposition. We know all these things, but what is the solution? That is also there. But is the providing a subsidy is a solution? If you take the example of India, where almost 20 million grid connected pump sets are there, and almost 10 million diesel run pump sets are there. How much subsidy is required? The kind of subsidy we are getting right now, by this pace, it will take another 50 years to get complete solarization of the pump sets, or there is no solution. So the solution is that what we feel and what we have pushing also is the commercialization, or the market should take, or it should be a market driven, where everyone should be a winner. The farmer, if he invests the money, he should be a winner. He should get the returns. The government or the DISCOM, they have to see what they are getting from that one. So we have developed and that was put up around 3 years ago to the government, this program, where we are saying that, as briefly is being discussed in the earlier presentations also, that the farmer will put up a solar water pumping system at his field, which will be almost 3 times of the capacity of the existing pump set. Say suppose, I give example, if existing pump set of a farmer is of 5 HP, then he has to put up a 15 kilowatt of a system. So what it will give them, that the 5 kilowatt he will keep on consuming for running the pumps, whereas 10 kilowatt at all the time will be fed into the grid. And whenever he will not use that 5 kilowatt, what is being earmarked for him, that can also be fed to the grid. In that way, it will be a business proposition for the DISCOM and for the farmer also. We'll move to the next slide, where I give the example that how commercially viable it is for the farmer and the government. Take the example of as I said, that a 5 HP pump, which will consume, or a system of 15 kilowatt has to be put up. So that will generate almost 22,000 kilowatt of energy per year. The farmer has 1/3 consumption, say around 7,005 kilowatt, and the balance 14,000 kilowatt will go to the grid all the time. Now, if the farmer is save something, or we can say that on the total generation of 14,000, there will be incentive to the farmer as given, say suppose 6%. So there will be some additional energy he will be getting from the overall generation. In this system, the farmer need not to invest anything. You will have a MOU or the agreement with the local DISCOM, and for a DISCOM, it will act as a decentralized power generating system. So 15 kilowatt system will act as a decentralized power generation system for the DISCOM. As of now also, because the DISCOM is supplying to the farmer free of cost electricity. So for them, it won't make much of a difference. Whereas the investment in the 15 kilowatt system will be done by the program implementing agency. So program implementing agency will have a MOU with the DISCOM. They will invest the money, the program implementation agency, and they will bill on a deemed generation basis or on the actual basis, you can say, to the DISCOM for the total energy generation. And out of this total energy generation, 1/3 will go to the farmer and 2/3 will feed to the grid. Now, how farmer will be benefited? First of all, he got the solarized system at free of cost. Now, moreover, he can save whatever the earmark quota for him. Say, suppose in this case, the 7,500 kilowatt is the earmark quota. So he can, whatever the energy he will save during the entire year, that will, at the prevailing market rate or the tariff of the electricity will be there, it will be paid to him as an incentive. So in a way, he will take care about the system. He will get some money. So as we see in this case, there is no investment from the government side. There is no subsidy involvement is there. DISCOM is being benefited because now they are no more required to supply the free electricity to the farmer, which is an average cost of almost a $0.1 US dollar or 10 cents, we can say. They will get the electricity at a much or almost a half of a cost from the solar plant. The energy will be generated from that one. So a win-win situation for all the stakeholders. So we proposing this one, that this way we can get commercialized that one, that can, a number of pumps can be implemented in a faster manner. We can achieve our target in a faster manner, because subsidy based is a very, very difficult thing to move in a faster manner. And especially if we'll say that, yes, in India, we have subsidy availability, but if we go to the African countries, again, the subsidy is a challenge over there. So that can be tried. Or in the Africa, if you will see that a decentralized solar power, this water pumping system is being given of a higher capacity, whether a mini grid can be created over there and the electricity can be provided to the nearby villages. They can form a mini grid or a cooperative over there, 5, 7, 10 farmers. So during daytime, whenever they feel they can use, otherwise it can be fed to the village or the nearby area. So this is the overall about the what we have done. And moreover, we have done the similar exercise for the MNRE also, like we did for the ISA, where 172,000 water pumps have been aggregated and they have been tendered throughout the country. And again, it is being benefited by the price exploration. The prices have come down because the big players have come and the quality aspect has been maintained. The standards which is being set up by the MNRE, that is being taken care. Moreover, the biggest thing about the quality is that after repair and maintenance for 5 years is with the supplier. So the consumer need not to worry about that thing. And the state government and the central government has saved on the exchanger of around 20 to 25% of the price reduction. So these are the things from my side. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Rajneesh. I think it was very, very relevant and very powerful presentation. And I think an obvious question starts coming, like Rajneesh, like I think just kind of taking your cue. What is the post tendering scenario, post demand aggregation scenario, Rajneesh? Because demand aggregation has helped you bring the price points down, right? You have done it for India situation where it was a subsidy market, and you have done it for Africa situation where it was a non-subsidy market. How do you see and bring these differences? Like at one point, Martin was saying that Africa market is more ready for a $200 to $400 price point solar water pumps, whereas in Indian market we are talking of a different number. So how do you see demand aggregation kind of bringing also a technological change and improvement?
So, Mr. Rahul, just see that the concept remains same of the demand aggregation, and it helps bringing down the price also. The subsidy or no subsidy for the supplier, it won't make much of a difference because they have to get the money from whichever source it will come to them. Now, about the quality aspect, I just would like to, for the benefit of the audience, even in any of the program, not only in the solar, whether it's a LED bulb or it's a street light or smart meter or EV vehicle, that comes with the service level agreement also, that we don't do our program only for the supply mode. We go for the program on the service mode, where the repair and maintenance and operation and maintenance also lies with the supplier for a project duration time. We take the example of a smart meter or street lights. So the contract is for 7 years with the DISCOM. So for 7 years, the supplier has to maintain also and upkeep also at a service level agreement has to be signed, whatever the level it is there. So in a way, we are assured about the quality, because all the challenges about the quality and it's a big challenge also, because supplying is easier than maintenance is a difficult task. So we mitigate through this. So in the African tender which we did, as I explained earlier, that we explore the prices in 4 parameters. So whichever way the member country feels comfortable, whichever the way they feel that it suits to their pocket, they can go ahead with that one. Apart from the quality, yes, the standards have been mentioned in the tender itself, whereas the international standard or minimum the IS standards has been kept. So that has been taken care.
Great. And Martin, there is a question for you from our audience, who are saying, like, given the wonderful work you are doing and the price point you are targeting in Africa, why don't you come and start selling it in India? And that remains for the other players also, who are trying to work in a more difficult context in Africa. So what learnings you think, Martin, like from Africa are more relevant to bring to India?
Well, I think to begin with, the reason we don't personally is because Africa is so big and there's so much bigger benefit from irrigating. The benefit from irrigating in India is not very big because you've already got half the population irrigating. While in Africa, with only 2 or 3% irrigating, when you irrigate, you can make a lot more money because you're the only one with food. But that said, these other companies I mentioned, Future Pump, for example, is actually manufacturing in India now. That's where their factory is. And I think they just got a license to actually sell there as well. The other thing we've heard is that because of the depletion of groundwater in India, is that the depth of the wells is really going down, getting much deeper. And so I think that would also be a bit of a challenge, because certainly, with a suction pump, you're only down about 7 or 8 meters. But even with these small solar pumps, you may be down at 10 or 15 meters. Now, some of them can go deeper, of course, but that's the other challenge. But yeah, someday when we finish Africa, we'll come to India.
And another point on technology side, I think, like, one point which Rajneesh mentioned is really driving the costs down by raising volumes, right, and lowering down the fixed costs. I think definitely demand aggregation does help in kind of posing a challenge to the supply industry to really meet the new volumes and be innovative. So what on the technology side, Martin, you think in BLDC, especially, like, do you think like adoption of permanent magnet motors, which are energy efficient motors, can bring down the overall system cost of pumps down, And any other technology innovations which you think really has a strong potential of bringing the price down?
Well, of course, the BLDC does have fixed magnets within the rotor, right? That's how they're designed. So really a BLDC is very, very similar to what you're saying. But the point that I mentioned, and I think is true, is that I think the lowest cost technology is going to be a single encapsulation, where you can literally encapsulate the motor into the pump body with a single injection molding, which is what we worked with this company in the States. But they wanted about $1.5–2 million to pay for the tooling. And at that point, they could push out, they claimed almost $500,000 to $1 million of these things a year. So even this price aggregation, the kind of numbers we're talking about, is only going to keep them busy for a few months. And so, yes, maybe they can make their money back, their tooling costs back, which would be good if they got a big order for 250,000 pumps. And I'm just curious, Rajesh, how do you decide who to buy from, and how many different companies win the tenders? Because with only 272,000 pumps in the ISA contract with 22 countries, that's not many pumps and all those different types.
No, here we do the procurement basically as per the procedure laid down as per the government of India. We follow the government of India procedure, and ISA also given us the go-ahead to adopt the same methodology. So we do the tendering, and there is a qualifying requirement as also mentioned in the tender, and the requirement of the country, individual country, which is being aggregated by the ISA. You are right that 272,000 number of pumps in 22 countries is not even as small. Also, if you see, it's almost a $1.2 billion tender. So quite a big number. But the countries which there are island countries where even the requirement as small as 100 pumps also, and there are countries where the requirement of 50,000 also. So 50,000 pumps for a country where even 1/10 of the existing pump strength is not of solar is a big numbers.
Yeah,
sure, great. Nilanjan, do you want to share a little more with your points and other questions that you have for the speakers? And for
so
the
I'm in a
panelists?
dilemma. I want to ask questions to the co-panelists, but I also see a lot of questions which are already there. So what do you want me to do? I can answer some of the questions which have been coming up from the audience, but I'm also tempted to ask questions to my co-panelists.
I think you have a share of the questions, and because some of the questions that I'm seeing from the audience are kind of getting answered with questions that we are answering. So I think you can possibly include them as your further questions to Martin and Rajesh.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So maybe my question would be to Martin, and then I can club some of the questions and answer the audience's some of the questions which they have.
Sure.
So thanks, Martin and Rajneesh, for your excellent presentation. Martin, taking us through the entire journey of innovations that has been happening throughout. So based on your experience, I mean, what do you see as the next big innovation to reach scale in Africa?
Well, I think, in terms of getting scale with these pumps, like I said, there's really a few options. We could come up with this $200 pump. I think that would go a long way to getting to scale. But on the other hand, I think that's a challenge. We are working on that. A number of people are working on it. It does require a dramatic increase in efficiency at a very low cost. The most efficient water pumps in the world, maybe the Lorenz helical pumps, which are about 50% efficiency. But that's hard to do with a very low cost pump and an impeller in a submersible pump. But if we could get there, that'd be great. And that would allow us to get the price down to about $200 because we need less panel power. But otherwise, I think the innovations are going to be around what the governments do in terms of subsidies and things like this aggregation of demand, where putting these smart subsidies on sustainable irrigation. One of the things we want to do in Africa is avoid some of the challenges that have happened in India, where of course there were massive subsidies on petrol and petrol pumps and motorized pumps, which meant that they were running 24/7 and depleting the aquifers. We hope that in Africa we can jump straight into water efficient technologies, going to pressurized hosepipe, sprinkler, and drip irrigation with small pumps, and have the subsidies there. Now, the other reason, of course, small pumps is they're sort of self-limiting. One of the challenges we have with the very large pumps that we're talking about in India is since solar energy is free, you are going to see a lot of more depletion of the aquifers probably. But with a human powered pump, of course, it's completely self-limiting, but also so is a small-scale solar pump, because if it's portable, you can only carry, like I said, so many watts, maybe 120, 200 watts at maximum on your back, even if they get more efficient. So that's, I think, what will happen. You want the subsidies to be promoting those sustainable, water-efficient technologies. And then
Right.
definitely more innovations on financing too. We have a lot of ideas around what else could be done there that I could talk more about, but yeah.
Okay, so Rahul, if I can quickly add on some of the questions which has come up as a response, and then pose another question.
Sure.
So I think just what Martin had mentioned. I mean, so when I was talking about productive use of solar water pump, that was primarily keeping in mind that the groundwater depletion. And that's where I also highlighted the slide where we need to look at the groundwater, the energy situation, and then design the schemes and products accordingly. So there had been two questions which are looking at alternative use of asset, and also the solar water pump and groundwater depletion. So that adds on together, because we need productive use of solar water pump to reduce the usage or exploitation of groundwater. So if there are alternative usage, if there is a value for the product, then people will look at alternative usage. Now the question is, the other question which also is associated with that is, what is the alternative use? And in the grid connected space, obviously you can send your electricity back to the grid, you earn money. So that's a way of not exploiting the groundwater, but also earning income by sending the excess energy back to the grid. What happens in the grid connected space? And that's the big concern. So there's no easy answer to it, because what we can look at is how that excess energy generated from the panel can be used for post harvesting, because you need the pump during the pre-harvesting period, when the crop is there on the ground, on the field. But once you harvest the crop, there are also needs of dehusking, packaging, utilizing in something. It's easier said than done, because the need assessment needs to be looked at, the sizing of the pump needs to be looked at, the retrofitting of the technologies need to be looked at. And that's the question which I would like to ask again, Martin, because there has been a lot of innovation which has been happening in Africa. So how do you think that in some of the cases, definitely the companies in Africa can learn from India in terms of what to do and what not to do, but how do we create a South-South learning collaboration, where we can learn from each other, so that we do not commit the necessary mistakes which the one country has done or one continent has done?
Yeah, well, I think discussions and really understanding the history of what did happen in India, because of course India was incredibly impressive. Within something like 30 years, India moved from 8% irrigated to 35% irrigated during the Green Revolution. And now it's at 48% irrigated, which of course has done amazing things in terms of poverty reduction and also in terms of food security. Africa, we don't have that. We don't have the poverty reduction. We don't have the food security. And with climate change, we absolutely need to move to that irrigation. And what we need to find, like I said, is a pathway in Africa where we can do it in a environmentally sustainable way. And so I think India has that same challenge now. Of course, in India that we've used way too much water. We now have to go back and introduce the much more efficient usage. And I think in Africa, we don't have that problem because like I say, we've only used about 10% of our groundwater and 5% of our renewable surface water. So we have a huge way we can go on water usage. But we do want to leapfrog the petrol pumps and leapfrog what's happened in India. And obviously, starting with these discussions and then really understanding the history of India, I think, and how it happened, and take all the good things which enabled India to move to 48% irrigated without getting into the overuse issues.
Sure.
Thank you. Over to you, Rahul.
I think we should conclude. We have already extended, but very quickly, Rajneesh, do you want to share what are the prominent operating models which the different governments were exploring in Africa once procuring these instruments and taking it to the end customers? How will that happen? Oh, your voice is not heard, Rajneesh. Are you mute?
Yeah. Hello.
Yeah, now it's here. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Rao. So that information we don't have because ISA is the forefront for that one, and they are dealing with their member countries. So the member country, I think, is devising their own strategy that how they can provide this use of this benefit of the pumps to their citizens. But coming back to one point, I would like to add to that one. As rightly said by Martin also and Mr. Nilanjan, that the depletion of water table is a big concern about that one. You will see the model I have presented in that one, where the farmer will get an earmark quota of the electricity he can use to run his pump. When he will use the pumps in an efficient manner, he knows that if he will save the electricity, he will get some incentive. So he will save the water also indirectly. Otherwise,
I think that's definitely a good model. We just hope that it also solves a lot of other operational issues that otherwise kind of get hurt from the ground in terms of the safety of the panels, maintenance of the panel and other parts. But I think the model definitely has high potential, Rajneesh, and we look forward for success of ESL in those models. I think the last thing,
not yet applicable in Africa, though. It's because the grid connections are so small, right? We got 33% grid connections in the rural areas, but some countries it's only 2 or 3%, and in South Africa it's 91%. So it's very tough to have the feedback tariff in rural Africa.
Okay. And I think, Nilanjan, maybe the last conclusion, if you can help do on the promotion side, because GIZ has worked extensively on the promotion of solar water pumps, and hearing from Martin and difficulties in aggregation, I think that remains kind of a central point around how really, when the need is there, definitely I think you only mentioned that if Google and Apple with their highly aspiring full products need so extensive marketing budgets, then in this kind of a push product that would need a further extensive budget. So how do we go about it? How do we solve that problem?
So I will try to address it from my side. I mean, there was also one question, and this also addresses that part, is that even when government is giving so much of subsidy, then why is it the numbers is just 2 lakhs or 2.5 lakhs? I think my last slide tries to summarize that part. Obviously, there are different factors. Communication is a big challenge. In most of the government programs, the way it is designed is it's more on the hardware cost. So there's very less money for the software cost, which is making people understand, and that is I see that is a big challenge. So what we are right now trying to do is trying to help work with MNRE to design communication materials for PM Kusum. We have just started this work. And we hope that we can make at least a few dent in making some of the communication products which will help to understand the different components, to understand what the technology brings in, and what are the opportunities. Why should the financial institutions get involved? Why should discoms get involved? How should discoms try to convince the farmers within a particular feeder And this is extremely important because we are talking about a market which is still a push market and not a pull market. So let us hope this is just the beginning of the journey, and hopefully I can answer you properly in a year's time.
So that is great. I think this brings to the conclusion, and also thanking to all of you. I think wonderful. This was kind of for me like the most terrific SWP discussion with very relevant people sharing their experience, and so pointed and so very relevant, and lot of things I think also remain particular to other off-grid, weak-grade appliances. So we will take it up more in our next things. I thank you, especially Martin, to be up so early in the day, and other speakers and definitely audience for sticking along with us late in the time. And as P Manifold, like we are doing work in India and now also growing in Africa. And friends like Martin are really keeping us more encouraged and passionate, I think, like to really do our work with more impact. I do share my encouragement for Irrigate Africa to really Martin and all his team and other players who are carrying this mission, and do encourage our all participants to be part of this mission. So with this, I think thank you everyone. Have a wonderful evening, and we will share the detailed recording of this in next 2 or 3 days. It will be available on P Manifold's website, and we do look forward to take this to the next equilibrium. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you,
Thanks a lot,
Martin.
everybody.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Be healthy. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks, yeah.
thanks.
Great. Okay.